May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm son of Yisrayl Abel, Yahshua, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Abel, Odahyah, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl Abel now entering the sanctuary. I now present one of the sons of Yisrayl Abel, Odahyah.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today my title is Character of a Goat, Character of a Sheep. Which one will we choose? I had an opportunity to go to the farm, and I saw differences between a goat and a sheep. And the book of Yahweh also talks about sheep and goats. I noticed two different things. If you all please turn to Psalms 100. Psalms 100 in verse 3 on page 473. On page 473, and it says, "Know that Yahweh is our Father. It is He who made us, and now we ourselves, we are His people and the sheep of His pasture." Now let's turn to Luke 12. In verse 32, "But do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's righteous pleasure to give you the kingdom." I would like to show you a picture of a goat and a sheep. The first thing you notice is that the sheep has wool and the goat has hair. The next thing you notice is that the goat is minding what we're doing and the sheep is minding its own business. Now here's some characteristics of goats and sheep. The first one is sheep tend to follow. Goats go their own way. Sheep follow Yahweh by keeping His laws. Goats want a king to rule over them, or just do as they please. Number 2, sheep will eat grass, while goats like to graze on almost everything they can reach and find edible. Sheep eat what is clean and acceptable. You will find goats eating hot dogs from Walmart that says kosher on the wrapper. Sheep say bah. Goats say meh. Goats and sheep have different languages. Sheep speak scriptures and the laws of Yahweh. Goats speak the mixture of righteousness and evil. Before I go, I would like to share with you a few acronyms. And we would like to be a sheep. We would like to be a sheep, not a goat. First, the goat. Greatest of all time, goat. And then the sheep. Serving, helping, educating everyone peacefully. So who would we like to be, the sheep or the goat? We would not want to be that. We would not like to be like that boxer that says, "I am the greatest of all times." We would like to humble ourselves so Yahweh can look at us and say that we're great because we keep his laws. With that, if you all please stand.
At this time, it's my privilege and honor to introduce to you the first speaker, Great Deacon Shaul Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh, you may be seated. Okay, so in 2014, Russia tested a ballistic missile. It was in October. So can we go ahead and show the video? And I'm just going to do a little bit of explaining over the video. All right, so what you're looking at now is you have these creatures that are prophesied in Yechezkel, in Revelation, and also in Daniel. You see the leopard here. You see the eagle. And what I'm doing is I'm fading them in and out so you can see what you're looking at. You see the lion up there. Here's your bear. Remember, Russia is always referred to as a bear. Here's the bull. And I'm showing it several times so you can really get an idea and really see it. And you'll notice sometimes the image will kind of freeze for a second. But that's just a little bit of a glitch. So here's the eagle again. And while we're looking at this, turn over to page 626. So here's the lion again, the bear. You have the bull again. And what's interesting about this is you have these pictures all in this one particular missile test. And then after we go through these animals, there were some other interesting things that were in this picture as well. And there are a lot of other things in here, but I wasn't able to really put them in there. Here we have our bear again. Hopefully everybody can see that. And you're going to notice that when it changes to show the second set of pictures, the contrast is going to change a little bit. All right, now notice this. This is very interesting. We see these four. We see Ban Ki-moon. And then we have President Obama. And you can see the nose lines up perfectly right there. Even Obama's finger on his mouth. There's Putin looking down on the whole situation. And then you have up at the top the key player in all this. So I'm going to let this go through one more time, and then we're going to read a few scriptures. Is it done? Okay, so if you'll notice in Yechidkel 1, verse 5, also from the midst were the figures of four living creatures. This was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, human shape. In verse 6, but each had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings. And jump down to verse 10. This was the likeness of their faces. It says they 4. Each had the face of a man on their front. The 4 had the face of a lion on the right side. The 4 had a face of an ox on the left side. And the 4 had the face of an eagle. Now turn over to Daniel, a few pages over, on 678. And we're going to be reading 7, 3 through 7. And 4 great beasts came up out of from the sea. Each was different from the others. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. And I beheld until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet like a man. And a man's heart was given to it. In verse 5, then behold another beast, the second that was like the bear, and raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and they said this to it, arise, devour much flesh. And in verse 6, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had 4 wings like a fowl upon its back. And this beast also had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. In verse 7, after this I saw the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and exceedingly strong, and had great iron teeth, and it devoured. It broke in pieces and trampled the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now remember all the players that are involved here, these 10 horns, these 10 kings that are about to bring this destruction upon the earth. So for my final scriptures, if you'll turn over to Revelation on page 974, we're going to read 4, 5 through 7. And surrounding the throne, and remember what that word throne means, were 24 seats, and sitting on the seats I saw 24 elders clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne. 7 lamps of fire. Notice this right here. But the living creatures full of eyes before and behind. And the first creature was like the lion, and the second creature was like the calf or the ox, and the third creature had the face of a man, and the 4th creature was like a flying eagle. And even in verse 8, you can see that it had eyes all around. Now, I just thought this was very interesting that Russia would do a missile test, and all of these things are in this image. So Yahweh's telling us something here. And we need to heed the words that are coming forth from Yahweh's last day's witness, because these 4 and the 10 kings are bringing destruction. And with that, I have the great honor to introduce the Great Kohan Nathanyah Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh, great saints of Yahweh. You may all be seated. And may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. As you can see, Yahweh is doing many, many works. Yahshua Messiah is doing many, many works in these last days in order to help us to be convinced of the way of Yahweh, to be willing to turn our hearts and our minds away from the standard that we had been brought up in and be brought to a new standard, okay? A renewed standard, which is the laws and the prophets. Yahweh set forth in these last days, our great witness, Yisrael Hawkins, to be the one to establish, him and his brother, to establish this work in these last days, according to prophecy, that we would then have that foundation, the foundation of the laws, the foundation of the prophecies, and also the writings of the prophets and the apostles. Today, the title of my speech is, Don't Accept the Counterfeit. Okay, don't accept the counterfeit. What you just saw that was brought forward by the great deacon was showing us the counterfeit. Okay, it was showing us the system that is in opposition to the way of Yahweh. Okay, the system that is in opposition to the standard of Yahweh. Okay, but just like the great teacher showed us, that they're all looking for peace. And even Satan is looking for peace. But her intent is to prove that she could bring peace in a way opposite from the way that Yahweh said to bring peace. And the counterfeit is usually a counterfeit operation or a counterfeit whatever it is. Like when you think of counterfeit money, the counterfeit money looks a lot like the original. It looks a lot like actual money, okay? But it's a counterfeit, it's a fake. So I just wanted to identify some of the counterfeits that Satan has put into place in these last days, okay? And if you remember, actually first let's start off by going over to the book of Matithia, okay? Matithia 24. And we're going to start at verse 21. So Matithia 24 and verse 21 is found on page 752. Okay? We'll start in verse 21. It says, "For then will be great tribulation." So this is speaking of a particular time period, "which has not come to pass since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever will be." Okay? So these things are specific for this particular time period, according to prophecy, okay? "And unless those days were shortened, there would no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake," okay, "for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened." Okay, so this is for the very elect's sake, okay, that the elect will not be deceived if we follow after the very elect. And who's the very elect? Yisrayl Hawkins is the very elect. Just as in Moshe's day, Moshe was the very elect. And those who held fast to Moshe, they were not deceived. In the same way, those of us who hold fast to Yisrayl Hawkins, we will not be deceived. Okay, the world has its ways and manners to deceive and to cause separation and division and war. And through that separation, division, and war, they seek after their own form of peace. Okay, but they can't have the peace that is joyful, that is abundant, and that is offered by Yahweh. But these are some of the counterfeits, okay, some of the contrasts that the adversary has opposed to the way of Yahweh. I just have 4 of them, very simple, and I'm sure that you could come up with many, many more. We know that Yahweh has established, used to establish his work 2 witnesses in this last period. Remember, it said in that day there will be great tribulation, okay? And that's in this particular time period. So there's 2 witnesses. Well, Satan has 2 witnesses too, okay? She has 2 witnesses also. Benedict, okay, he's still in office. He is the 7th. Remember, if you remember in Revelations, he is the 7th. And then you have Francis, okay, who is with the 7th, but is the 8th, or he's within the reign of the 7th, but he's the 8th. Okay? Now, if you look at what we have going on in the house of Yahweh at this time, okay, we are the 7th era. Okay, but you see how the adversary wants to bind and tie her deception in with the way of Yahweh. If you remember, the scripture shows that they have a form of righteousness, but they deny the authority of it. And this is how we're going to be able to discern between what is deception and what is the truth. Okay, what is deception and what is the truth? It's obvious that Satan has also counterfeited Yahweh's rainbow. Okay? The rainbow that Yahweh gave of such a beautiful reminder of Yahweh's covenant between his creation and himself. Okay, but what she did was she took it and perverted it. If you remember many years ago, the Great Kohan brought sermons on the stones, okay, the 12 stones of the high priest's breastplate, and showed that she only has 9 of them. She lost 3 of them. Okay? But what he said was, even the remaining ones that she has, those 9 that she has, are perverted. They've been perverted. And so what she did was she took Yahweh's rainbow and perverted it. So now the rainbow stands for same-sex marriages, all the abominations that come forth from the ways of the kings of the East. The fornication, the adultery, the sodomy, the bestiality, all of these things. Now she took such a beautiful reminder and placed it on something that was so perverted and reprobate. Okay, so this is another counterfeit. We have the feast days, okay, the feast days of Yahweh, which are the mark of Yahweh. Now, in the house of Yahweh, I have never heard this taught anywhere else, showing that the mark of the beast is not something, some numbers that are going to be engraved in your hand and a microchip shoved underneath your skin. This is not what separates a saint from a Satanist, okay? The mark of the beast is keeping Satan's holidays and Satan's sabotaged Sabbath, okay, which is Sunday. Sunday, the sabotaged Sabbath, okay? And all of these things that she counterfeits, okay? She's taken the glory away from Yahweh. She said, I will raise my throne above the stars. Another teaching that the house of Yahweh is the only one that teaches on the face of the planet is that Yahweh is not a God. Okay, now these things seem very simple to us because we've heard them on a regular basis. But when you are able to see what the world has been, how the world has been deceived, if you'll turn over to Genesis chapter 2 and verse 9, okay, you see how the world has been deceived by such a counterfeit that seems so right, okay, but is desperately wrong. Let's go Genesis chapter 2 and verse 9. I want you to look at what Yahweh inspired to be written about what occurred at that time period in the Garden of Eden, okay? Verse 9. Out of the ground Yahweh made every tree grow that was pleasant to the sight and desirable for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of righteousness and evil was also in the midst. Okay? Both of these administrations were there. They were both trees. But one tree Yahweh said, do not partake of. And the other one, Yahweh said, you shall partake of this one. Okay, this is the tree which leads to life. But if you remember, if we go over to chapter 3, we'll see how the adversary deceives mankind, all of mankind. Okay, Genesis 3 and verse 6. It says, so when the woman saw that the tree that she was not supposed to partake in was desirable for food, it was actually edible. Okay, you can actually eat it. Pork, you can actually put bacon in your mouth, chew it, swallow it, and eat it. But does it bring life, though? Okay, just recently there's been more research on the death that comes along with pork. That what occurs in people who eat pork, what they found was the white blood cell count skyrockets as though you're looking at a body that's stricken with leukemia. Somebody who eats pork, the white blood cell count skyrockets as though you're looking at a body that is riddled with leukemia. Okay? So she saw it was desirable for food. But further it says, and that it was pleasant to the eyes. Okay? Pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise. Okay, so this is how the adversary deceives mankind, because the ways of the adversary are not obviously and overtly dangerous. Okay, people are not eating pork and dying on the spot. Okay, people are not committing fornication and adultery and dying right away. If that occurred, it'd be too obvious and everybody would stay away from it. When you steal, that hand that you use to steal doesn't drop off immediately. Okay? If that occurred, no one would be stealing. Okay? These things are not what occurs out in Satan's system. Okay? She has brought forth this counterfeit that is so subtle. Remember what Yahweh said about the adversary, that her ways are subtle. And the reason why I wanted to bring this particular message is we have to adhere, okay, and tether ourselves to the one sent. We have to. Because he is the one, look, Yahweh promised that there would be someone to guide and direct a people into perfection. And as a matter of fact, what Yahweh further said was that he will pour out his glory through those people who are tethered to the one sent. Okay? Yahweh will utilize each and every one of us to pour out his glory upon mankind. And so it's right for us. It's right for us to enjoy and to follow the standard of Yahweh. There's a fourth counterfeit, okay? And this, again, this is only four that I picked for the short time that I'm up here. But if you look to my right, you see the menorah. And that menorah represents 7 promotions of Yahweh. Okay? 7 upliftments of Yahweh. Now, Satan has her 7 promotions, because remember, the mountain and promotion, right? And a mountain is like unto a hill, a large hill. Well, she has her 7 also, because Rome is the city built on 7 hills. Okay? And she has her promotion there also. And so that's the counterfeit. You know, this is how she's striving to deceive the minds of the people, by causing us to be confused first through eating food that seems desirable, okay, or that we could actually eat, bringing in that confusion, and then throwing in a counterfeit. You know, there's a term in the world, they say, and this is what you see with the pharmaceuticals, too high to riot. People are too high to riot. Too high to, rioting is not the right thing to do, you know, but it's like they're too high to be righteous. Instead of riotous, they're too high to be righteous, you know, because the pharmaceuticals and the pork and the illicit acts and the entertainment and the deception, all of these things prove to be such a strong deception that the people cannot see clearly what is the right way. Okay, but if we follow after the ways of Yahweh, you know, take our honey and butter, because you will know to choose righteousness. You know, cleanse ourselves, do the cleanses, prepare ourselves for the way of Yahweh, because if we do, the sacrifices that we've given up to Father Yahweh, that we've presented our bodies as living sacrifices, we will not be disappointed in that great day. Praise Yahweh. And if you'd all please stand, I'd like to turn the floor over to the Great Kohan Benjamin Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. Wow, it's warm in here. Okay, so let's get back to this Oslo. Let's get back to Norway. You know, remember those reindeer? Y'all remember that? August 26th, 323 dead reindeer. 3 days later, it's reported on August 29th. Pointing us back to the two-state solution, which came just in time. Did you notice? UN Resolution 2334 on December 23rd, on the eve of 1224, on a Friday afternoon. Boy, you can't get any closer than that, because Saturday was 1224 and Sunday was 1225, and they're closed. Okay, was it not delivered on time? Okay. Now, I want you to turn over to Daniel 9:22. Daniel 9:22. On page 681. And while you're there, I want you to just be there, because when they reported, August 29th, when the reindeer story was reported, was the 242nd day, because it was a leap year in 2016. And the Oslo Agreement, if you'll read the Oslo, you know, it's very important to go back, and you can download it online, these Oslo Accords from 1993. What the aim of these negotiations was leading to a permanent settlement based on Security Council Resolution 242. 242 from 1967 and 338 from 1973. Of course, UN Resolution 242 was passed on November 22nd, 67, and that was after the Six-Day War, 1967 war there. Resolution 338 was passed on 22nd October 1973 after the Yom Kippur War, and all that was telling them to do was get back to implementing Resolution 242. So everything was pointing back to 1967, you know, the borders, all those things. They needed to get back to squaring up on that resolution and doing what it said. Now, I want you to understand something about the resolution that was passed on 12/23 in the UN. This is the Security Council resolution from the United Nations website. It's number 2334. And I want to share with you what 2334 means, because it's very important that we start to gaze and look and behold intently what's being shown. Because that's what 2334 means. It means to behold, to look at, experience, to gaze, to discern. And it's from the actual root word, and Pastor used this word a couple weeks ago. It's from the root word, the English term theater, where people concentrate on the meaning of an action. Okay? That means we need to study so we can understand and discern what this Oslo is all about, what these resolutions that are being passed are all about. Something else I want you to notice, it was at the 7,853rd meeting that this took place. 7853 is Satan. Remember the abomination of the desolator. The desolator is the Vatican, but who does the Vatican work for? And what is this peace going to bring? Peace? No, it's going to bring destruction. It's going to destroy many. Okay, as Daniel told us. Now, I would like to read in Daniel 9:21. Now, I want you to remember Pastor's sermon last week, where he talked about Revelation 1:1. And in fact, let's turn there real quick and just read that real quick before we read this. Keep your finger in Daniel. I'm already in Revelation 1:1. I still haven't put my little tabs in there. I got to get busy on that. But Revelation 1:1, where it says, the revelation of Yahshua Messiah, which Yahweh gave to him, to show his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and he signified it through his Malach to his servant Yochanan. And who is his Moloch? It's Yisrael Hawkins, right? Pastor Yisrael Hawkins. So turn back to Daniel again. I remember last week he talked about Daniel 8. And I want, since it's on the same one page over on 680, let's look at 8:17. It says, "So he came near where I stood," talking about this man. "When he approached, I was frightened and fell down upon my face. But he said to me, 'Understand, O son of man, for the fulfillment of the vision belongs to events that will take place in the time of the end.'" Now, get this. He's saying, understand. Okay, keep that in your mind. Now, turn over to Daniel 9. We'll look over at 9:21. "Yes, while I was speaking in prayer," this is Daniel, "the man of Yahweh, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning." Okay, now, remember, Pastor wasn't alive back when Daniel had this vision. This was a vision, okay, of a future event, okay? And he said, "Being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, 'O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you insight and understanding.'" Okay, insight and understanding. "At the beginning of your supplication, the command was given, and I have come to show you, for you are greatly beloved." And by the way, if you look up today's date, 1/7/17, it's from 1730, and it means beloved. And if you remember, that was the amount of miles from Times Square to the house of Yahweh. Okay? Because the house of Yahweh is the beloved. You are saints, you are much beloved. And Pastor Yeshurun, beloved Israel, is much beloved, is he not? Okay, now it says, and he says, "Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision." Think about the definition I just gave you from 23:34, that resolution. Now notice what he says. 70 weeks are determined upon your people. Now, I want you to remember in the Mark of the Beast, Volume 1, Chapter 11, Pastor first wrote of this 7-year agreement here on page 183, where he says, Yael was speaking of the Great Tribulation, which starts with a strong covenant of 7 years and ends at the end of the 7 years with a great nuclear war. Okay? It ends in destruction. Now, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. You like homework? Yes, I see everybody shaking their head. Yes, great. Okay, so I want you to go back and read this sermon from 52309. If you remember, 523 is also associated with Yahweh's in full control. Remember, Yahweh told us on 523 about his dream from 512? Now, if you'll notice, it's the 9th book of Israel, part 1, chapter 24, or 9:24, or Daniel 9:24. Because this entire sermon is about the Oslo Agreement and the secret deals that were made. Remember, the Oslo was a secret agreement hashed out by the Jesuit Freemasons, the Vatican, in Oslo, Norway. Okay? And if you remember, Shimon Peres was the chief architect. By the way, Shimon Peres, he died 18 days after the reindeer incident. He had a stroke on, if you'll notice, he had a massive stroke on the very day the Oslo was signed. September 13, 2016, at the age of 93, as in 1993, go back to Oslo. Notice when he was buried. September 30th or 9/30 or 9/3. Now, you know the interesting thing about that burial date. By the way, Oslo II was signed on September 28th, which is the very day he died. September 28th. But I want to show you something interesting about the day he was buried. On the Hebrew calendar, the day was 930. That's the 27th day of Elul in the Hebrew year 5776. Well, guess what? In 1993, the 27th day of Elul was the very day he signed Oslo. Isn't that interesting? Huh. I wonder if he had a little help dying. Because if you remember, Oslo, by the way, I kind of get suspicious when I see people die 33 days after the reindeer died. Now, let's continue. By the way, did you get your 2017 calendar yet? Well, the 7th Roman month of July 2017, 717. Remember, 717 means to gather, doesn't it? This is where you'll find the information on the 7-year peace treaty, the Oslo Accord. September 13, 93, went into effect on October 13, 1993. Please go and study this. Get a copy of the Oslo Agreement and familiarize yourself with it as well. It's very interesting. And read the sermon from 5/23/09 about the secret deals that were made and how the Vatican, for money, they're going to divide the land for gain. And by the way, what does Perez mean? Just turn over to Daniel 8 or Daniel 5. Remember Mene, Tekel, Upharsin? Daniel 8:25 on page 677. This is the interpretation. Remember, Mene meant to number, Tekel meant to weigh, and Perez means to divide. To divide. And that's exactly what the man did. Dividing the land. Okay? That's what the Oslo was about. You'll hear more about it as time goes on. Now, last week, getting back to Daniel 9 here. Daniel 9, where it talked about 70 weeks are determined. And he goes through all these things, and you look down to 9:27, it says, he will confirm a covenant with Rabin, that's what that many means, Rabin, for 1 week, 7 years, and in the midst he will cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, which it did 3.5 years after it was signed. Netanyahu put a stop to it. Instead he will cause the prevalence of the Lord of heaven, even until the destruction that is determined will be poured upon the desolator. And the destruction that's determined is found in Daniel chapter 7, where it talks about he beheld until the beast was slain and his body was destroyed and given to the burning flame. And that's in Daniel 7:11. Now, remember what Pastor showed Daniel and also showed Yochanan. Well, turn over to Chagia real quick. Chagia chapter 2, in verse 23 on page 716. It says, in that day, says Yahweh of hosts, I will take you, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, Pedaiah, says Yahweh, and I will make you as a signet, for I have chosen you, says Yahweh of hosts. I will make you as a signet. Remember, signet and signify. Well, what is a signet? What is a signet? Well, let me show you what a signet is. Kings used to wear these on their finger. And they would seal documents and things with it, with wax, to signify that it really came from them, that they had the authority of the king. And they wore it on their right hand. Now, it says, this is from questions.org, it says, ancient kings used signet rings to designate authority, honor, or ownership. A signet contained an emblem unique to the king. Official documents were sealed with a something of soft wax and impressed with the king's signet, usually kept on a ring on his finger. Such a seal certified the document as genuine, much like a notary public's signature or stamp today. Okay, now, in that Revelation 1:1 where he says, signified by his Moloch, It means to make known, and it means to make known and show the importance. To show the importance and to intently study to understand it. Okay, that's what pastor's job is. To give a sign. Okay, now turn over my last scripture, turn over to Revelation 22. Revelation 22. Pastor quoted this last week. 22:16. On page 986, he says, I, Yahshua, have sent my Malach to testify to you these things in the congregations of the house of Yahweh. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. Remember, he sent his Malach to testify. This is Revelation 22:16. 22:16 in Hebrew is Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel. Well, who is Zerubbabel? It's he who opposes Babylon. Who's he that opposes Babylon? That's right, it's Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins, but that's not all, because this is the only time I've ever found this. I've never found this ever before. Not only in the Hebrew is it Zerubbabel, but also in the Greek. 22:16 is Zerubbabel. Is he not showing you definitively who his servant is? His signet? Yes, he is. There's not going to be any doubt. This is going to be made crystal clear, is it not, House of Yahweh? That's right. So be studying this Oslo. Be studying the sermon, 52309. And there's other sermons also. He talked way back about, even Kohan Nathanyah used to talk about those secret deals that were made with Shimon Peres in the Vatican. You need to read this nuclear baby. Get it and read it, okay? That has everything you need to know about that Oslo, okay? So with that, it's been an honor and privilege to talk to you, and I'd like to turn it over now to the Great Kohan Odahyah Hyler Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. I want to put in your mind something really quickly before we get into the news to remember this. In Matthew 24, remember this and think about this as we're playing the news. Of course, this is when the apostles came to Yahshua, and they asked him what would be the sign of his coming and the end of the age. And of course, Yahshua said, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, and see that you are not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And remember, there will be famines and pestilence, diseases, epidemics, and earthquakes in place after place. Earthquakes in place after place. But of course, remember also in verse 13 it says, but he who endures until the end will be saved, or given authority, as Pastor has brought out. And in thinking of that and going through that with what Yahshua said would take place in these last days, of course, we start out in the news with earthquakes. They're saying now that earthquakes are coming in swarms, so they're coming in multitudes. In fact, they measure in hundreds now. They're actually coming, and they're really worried how this is going to affect. The first one is the San Andreas Fault in California. They're really worried about what's going to take place because they're seeing not just one here, one there, but they're coming without warning, and they're coming hundreds at a time. And then, of course, we see in Fort Lauderdale, they had a shooting at the airport, and one thing that everyone needs to see and get from this is where Scott Paley of CBS News, he makes a comment, there's nothing anyone could do. And when you think about it, if you put yourself in a situation, if you're in a place where there's no safety and protection and someone wants to start shooting, is there really anything anyone can do? Because of the mindset of this world and what's been put in the mindset from this system, it's a lack of training. Well, there's nothing you can do except run and hope for the best. The best thing to do is not put yourself in those situations where harm could come upon you. And then, of course, Chicago, the death rate there last year, they set a new record once again with the death rate. They said it was the highest one in 60 years as far as increase. And, of course, that's in this last generation. Now some are suggesting that the federal government get involved to help make Chicago a safer place. I would advise Chicago before they do that to ask Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and see how the federal government did there first before they start asking for help from the federal government. What's missing? And the lady says there's a lady in the report. She says that there's no support for the people there. And that's true. There's no stability. There's no foundation. What she's saying without knowing it, there's no rules to keep them safe. There's no peaceful solution. There's no laws of Yahweh, because the peaceful solution and the laws of Yahweh, they keep us safe. And when you remove that, safety is removed, safety is stolen, it's taken away. And then something very important, just up in Amarillo, this is something everyone needs to be aware of because this was very easily done. A man got some pesticides from his friend. They were pellets. They looked very harmless. And he threw them underneath his house, and then he sprayed them with water to try to get rid of them. And the toxic gas from those pellets killed 4 of his children. So it seems very harmless. It doesn't seem like something that would be that deadly, but it's very deadly. So make sure to pay attention to that and never give in to that. And then, of course, Vatican City. Many people are actually against. There's now a McDonald's that is in Vatican City. And, of course, the recent most updated hangout is the Hard Rock Cafe in Vatican City. And people are speaking against it until you realize who owns the buildings, who's actually the leaser to these people who are actually leasing this property. And, of course, it's the Vatican. The Vatican is leasing these buildings out. Now, think about this. McDonald's pays the Vatican $31,000 a month. That's their lease fee per month. And one of the priests they're talking to there, he kind of, I think he acknowledges it without realizing it. He said there's bigger scandals taking place than this one. He acknowledges at least it's a scandal. But more on Russia and United States, the tension's building there. Now, this is very interesting because Senator McCain and Senator Lindsey Graham, of course, they're both Republican, just like the President of the United States is. They're actually over in the Baltic states right now, in and around Russia over there, and they're visiting. And they're making the comments that if the president will not act against Russia, then Congress will do it by themselves. They will go in alone, and they are going to retaliate. So that's something very interesting to watch out for also. And then in Damascus, Syria. Damascus, that's the capital of Syria. Right now they're having a hard time getting drinking water because someone dumped an abundant amount of diesel fuel in the city water supply. But they're drilling wells, they're trying to get water for the people. But think about that. What kind of heart, what kind of mind would dump diesel fuel in the water for people, young and old alike, to drink? And think of what that does to the people themselves. And then Russia, they're scaling down their military in Syria, but pay close attention to where they're moving it. Remember President Duterte from the Philippines, he actually spoke out against the Vatican, spoke out against the United States. Very thoroughly he spoke out, and he's usually very colorful in his words when he speaks. But guess where Russia's going? That's right, they're headed to the Philippines to hold military drills. And also China, Philippines talking to China. And remember the 2 countries that the Pope has never went to, Russia and China. But something very interesting to watch with China. China said in the last few weeks that it wants to start having ties with the Vatican. Well, why? Why would China even care? Well, North Korea is saying that they now have a missile that could reach the United States. Well, lo and behold, who is now being blamed for North Korea's nuclear program? China, that's right. Nothing like sanctions for China. Now, think about this, because if you're wanting to talk to the Vatican, evidently they're starting to bend your arm a little bit. And they're starting to apply pressure, so you try to reason out something to get the pressure to ease off of you. And then Turkey and the United States relations. Turkey is now referring to the United States as an enemy. And they say that multiple times. But also keep in mind that the largest nuclear weapon site the United States possesses is in the Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey. So think about that and continue to watch what takes place in and around the great river Euphrates. And then Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu is in a very sticky position right now with his 2-state solution. And of course, following after Yitzhak Rabin and others before him, there are many that want to go the way of the 2-state solution. Then there's many that don't want to go that way. And of course, there's some saving face trying to take place right now with this. But he is being questioned about accepting gifts and bribery. Now think about this with this taking place, and of course is coercion taking here, rule by force taking here. But think about, remember last week we showed Mahmoud Abbas and Pope Francis, when they met, Mahmoud Abbas said, our mission is the same. Remember, what does the Vatican want in the nation of Israel? They want those holy sites. They always have one of those holy sites. They tore them down. I guess they want them back. But that's what they want. Well, of course, it may seem like a small thing and a nonchalant thing for Netanyahu to be questioned, but remember where Ehud Olmert is at right now. He's in prison, and he was put in prison. He's the former prime minister of Israel, and he was put in prison concerning bribery charges, taking gifts. That's what occurred to him. So Netanyahu has some proof there to look at to help persuade him if there need be persuasion take place. And then last but not least, the Mosul Dam. Remember the city of Mosul? That's where the United States was supposedly going in to liberate them. At the same time, Russia was liberating Aleppo in Syria. Then you had the United States in Iraq. Well, the Mosul Dam is the fourth largest dam in the Middle East. There's 7 dams. It dams up the Tigris River. There's 7 dams, and there's 2 after that, but they're barrages, so they're low-headed dams. They're not very large in size. So this Mosul Dam is very important, but it is starting to break down. It's starting to fall apart. Scientists are saying that if that dam breaks, that it would equal the same devastation as a nuclear bomb in that region. 1.5 million people would die very quickly due to the water taking through the civilian areas and most likely breaking down the dams after that, and eventually it ends up in the Persian Gulf. Now I want to show you very quickly, just in a picture, if you look here, you have the Euphrates River and you have the Tigris River, and eventually they go into one. This is the river they're talking about, and of course all of this, once again, is in and around the great river Euphrates, where we're talking about massive destruction could take place at any day, any time. At this time, if we could go ahead and please play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, in the news today, we have the situation in Damascus going from bad to worse as now the drinking water is contaminated. We'll have that story along with the Turkey-U.S. relations not improving. I have a little bit difference there on who's a friend and who's not. Right. And also another shooting, this time at a Florida airport. All these stories and many more. But first, you've heard about a swarm of insects, but how many of you have heard about a swarm of earthquakes? Well, the first week in 2017 shook people out of their beds in parts of California and Nevada, not by one earthquake, but multiple ones and a barrage of aftershocks all in one day.
Wow. Now, the first of 3 strong earthquakes began shortly after midnight near Hawthorne, Nevada. The 5.7 magnitude quake was felt from Las Vegas to San Francisco. Just 4 minutes later, the second earthquake of equal strength began, followed by yet a third, registering at 5.5 on the Richter scale. Now, throughout the rest of the day, over 100 aftershocks could be felt. Wow.
Seismologists like Lucy Jones from the U.S. Geological Survey are viewing it as a wake-up call to prepare for the unexpected. But they say it's hard to determine when the next big earthquake will be. The 6.7 magnitude quake of Northridge, California in 1994 showed absolutely no warning signs. Now, in an interview with CBS News, Jones explained, "We have 4 shocks before about half of our big earthquakes in California, but they aren't usually coming as a swarm."
And you're seeing the numbers increase consecutively.
That's right.
That's interesting. She continued, with Northridge, there was nothing before it at all. The San Fernando earthquake didn't have any. The Loma Prieta earthquake didn't have an immediate swarm. It had a magnitude 5.0 2 months beforehand.
Now, last September, there was another swarm of seismic activity which occurred along the Salton Sea. That caused scientists to sound the alarm that the possibility of an even bigger quake could be about to take place along the San Andreas Fault. But the question remains, will there be another big one soon? Now, scientists cannot really answer that question. What they know is, based off historical trends, these swarms could be leading up to a major earthquake event.
So in their eyes, it's not a matter of if it'll occur,
but when. That's correct.
Interesting. Well, the next report brought terror of another kind to the Fort Lauderdale, Florida airport on Friday, January 6th. A scene all too familiar nowadays. A man pulls out a gun and begins firing into a crowd of people. This time, it was at the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport in the baggage claim area of Terminal 2.
The shooter was brought into custody by federal agents, but not before he had killed 5 people and injured another 6. The suspect was identified as 26-year-old Esteban Santiago. He was a combat engineer in the Alaska National Guard until August, when he was granted a general discharge under honorable conditions.
Interesting. Now, he had served in the Puerto Rico National Guard as well, being deployed to Iraq from April 2010 to February 2011. Upon returning, he received the Combat Action Badge for personally engaging enemy forces. Now, recently, Santiago had gone to the FBI concerned that his mind was being controlled by the CIA, trying to turn him into an Islamic terrorist. He underwent some mental health evaluations, which found him to be sane, and they returned his gun to him, the same gun he used in the shooting at the Fort Lauderdale airport just a few months later.
Wow. Well, no one could have predicted this shooting. What's worse, authorities say, is that there was nothing that could have been done to prevent it from taking place. The gun used in the baggage claim shooting was checked as luggage by Mr. Santiago. The Transportation Security Administration, or the TSA, allows guns to be checked if unloaded and locked in a hard case, but it also requires the ammunition be disclosed to the airlines prior to the checking in.
Well, 15 years has passed since 9/11, and airports have increased security substantially. However, there are still some areas like check-in and baggage claim which are not included in the secured areas and are now called soft targets.
Ron Hosko, a former assistant director of the FBI, explains to CBS News how soft targets are formed. He said, "One of the great challenges of a soft target is it's like squeezing a balloon. Where I tighten up my security in one place, the balloon expands somewhere else and presents itself as another soft target."
Hosko says securing areas like baggage claim in every airport would be billions of dollars in the cost for these airports. So he says we have to put it in that broader perspective. You're more likely to die in a car accident on your way to home rather than to be in a terrorist strike at a U.S. airport. And that's the reasoning used to leave these areas unsecure.
Not too reassuring to the families of those victims.
That's right.
Well, President-elect Donald Trump tweeted to Chicago's mayor this past week saying, "Chicago murder rate is record-setting. 4,331 shooting victims with 762 murders in 2016. If mayor can't do it, he must ask for federal help."
Well, the death toll of 762 is the largest in 2 decades. Demonstrators took to Chicago's Magnificent Mile carrying a wooden cross for each person killed in 2016. It really puts into perspective the reality of so many lives lost. 2016's murder rate was 57% higher than 2015, so it's not decreasing by any means, and of course was the largest annual increase in 60 years. Yeah.
Well, the Chicago police know this problem needs to be tackled. They already know why the sharp increase. Gang violence is apparent, as 8 out of 10 murder victims is either a gang member or an associate to one. Now, they also can see where the most of the violence is taking place in just 5 out of Chicago's 22 police districts. So they've narrowed it down to those 5.
Yeah. However, police have not answered the question that many people are asking. Is the spike in crime because cops are pulling back? Well, Susan Johnson, a counselor to families of the murder victims, seems to think they are. She says, we're leaving people in the aftermath without any support. They are crime victims.
The city has plans to hire and promote 1,000 new officers during 2017. They also want to add body cameras to all the police districts. But will that be enough to make the change? Well, within the first 5 hours of the new year, they already had 2 homicides.
Well, the citizens who are involved in these shootings are definitely not responding favorably, I guess, with the proposed addition of more police officers. And we'll see how that turns out for them. Well, Jeff, Susan Johnson really understood the problem and the solution when she said, we're leaving people in the aftermath without any support. Those grieving will often look to take revenge for the death of their loved ones, and this only perpetuates the ongoing violence. What they need is for someone to teach them how to stop the violence, and of course that's what they're calling for, but they're not really getting the answers.
Right, and really how to forgive one another and build a positive character within themselves so that that someone doesn't want to bring this harm to another individual.
That's right.
Well, our next report shows the extreme need for lessons in compassion and respect. In a video streamed live on Facebook, 4 African Americans can be seen beating and tormenting a mentally disabled white man. Now, President Obama called the video both despicable and terrible, and we do caution you, the video is very disturbing.
That's right. The mentally challenged 18-year-old victim had been missing for 2 days. In the video, he can be seen being kicked, choked, cut, and forced to drink from a toilet. Officials say the 4 tormentors, 2 women and 2 men, had been texting the teenager's parents during the 5-hour incident in a possible extortion attempt.
The victim was eventually rescued by officers after he was found wandering the neighborhood bloody and incoherent. Now, the 4 perpetrators were later arrested. All of them now face charges for hate crimes as well as kidnapping, battery, and other offenses.
Well, in other disturbing news, the hazardous effects of pesticides are once again gaining notice. We have Larry McGee following a tragic incident for us coming out of Amarillo, Texas, as well as several other reports. Larry, what do you have for us?
A heartbroken father who had been using professional-grade pesticides tragically lost 4 of his children when he unknowingly set off a chemical reaction that produced gases that ultimately poisoned them. Authorities say the bereft father caused the fatal reaction when he seeded pellets of a pesticide called weevil-cide under his home and then later attempted to wash them away. The water is said to have intensified the release of ammonium phosphate and killed the young victims as they slept. According to rules established by the EPA, purchase of the toxic agent is restricted to licensed professionals. But reports are that the man was able to bend the rules and acquire the poison from a friend. At the time of this report, hazmat teams are said to still be operating in the area that is the site of what officials are calling the worst poisoning accident in Amarillo's history. History is also being made on the 7 Hills this week as Vatican City opens the door for its first McDonald's. Local, smaller restaurants are predictably concerned with the fast food giant's arrival, and its presence is allegedly also drawing backlash from at least one Vatican official who is calling its arrival a disgrace, stating that the major chain sells food that he would never eat. The official sentiments are apparently out of sync with the top brass, however, as the Vatican is reported to own the building where the establishment is being housed and is getting its cut to the tune of $31,000 per month in rental fees. While the administration of Pope Francis has spoken out publicly against the pursuit of commercialism, its policies have reflected something different, with the Hard Rock Cafe also in its fold and a Starbucks scheduled to soon open. Other Vatican officials brushed the profiteering off as insignificant, and a rather telling observation, they believe there are more serious problems in the world. According to one Catholic priest, there are greater scandals. there are still threats coming from American officials related to the Russian hacking scandal. The U.S. has set to level sanctions against 9 individuals and entities, including the Russian spy agency, the FSB, and the GRU, which is Russian military intelligence, both of which are strongly suspected of being behind the alleged incident. The U.S. is ordering 35 Russian intelligence operatives and their families out of Washington, D.C. and California within 72 hours. 2 mansions owned by the competitor in Maryland and New York have been shut down also, with President Obama declassifying Russian information to assist networks in the U.S. and overseas to identify, detect, and disrupt Russian cyber attacks as well. In defiance, President-elect Trump continues to dismiss the claims, stating that he thinks we need to get on with our lives and that computers have complicated lives very greatly, and the whole age of computers has made it where nobody knows exactly what's going on. That drew barbed comments from at least one U.S. senator. Russia itself says if Washington takes new hostile steps, it will receive an answer. Any actions against Russian diplomatic missions in the United States will immediately backfire at U.S. diplomats in Russia, he said. The U.S.'s latest moves are in line with its promises for payback delivered by Senators Lindsey Graham and John McCain on CNN last week. The consequences for perpetuating the cycle of retaliation and war are sadly evident in Damascus, where for the last 10 days, millions of citizens have been struggling to secure safe drinking water after the customary water sources were reportedly targeted and contaminated by mercenaries. The government is moving to offset the crisis by employing alternative resources such as wells and distributing bottled water free of charge. But the efforts are only reportedly meeting about 30% of the demand. The attacks, which are being referred to as desperate, came just days after the government's perceived victory in Aleppo. Mercenaries have now reportedly escalated the conflict to new heights and have now gained control over an area in the country's capital of Damascus. Despite it all, Russia is still announcing plans to reduce its military presence in Syria following the ceasefire deal and is recalling its naval group, which has been stationed off the Syrian coast. President Putin is calling the mission a success and is heeding the advice of his defense ministry in making the reductions. But the Russian head says they will unconditionally continue to fight against international terrorism and will continue to support the legitimate Syrian government against terror. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, that will be interesting, Katan, to see if Russia actually completely pulls out of the area or just backs up a little bit to see what takes place.
Time will tell.
Well, Russia is planning to stage naval drills with the Philippines. Now, this after President Duterte's decision to downgrade their ties with the United States. 2 of Russian warships within their Pacific Fleet docked in Manila on Tuesday for the purpose of taking part in bilateral Navy drills over the next 4 days. Special weapons and tactics will be on display during the drills.
The Philippine president said that he was considering Moscow's offer to sell submarines and drones to them in order to develop their military modernization. Duterte expressed a desire to forge stronger defense and economic alliance with Russia, and China expressing the desire to cut back its U.S. troop presence in the Philippines.
Now, the country of China is willing to conduct constructive dialogue with the Vatican. The government is willing to narrow differences and seek improved relations between the two sides. That according to Yahshua Wen, the Director General for the State Administration for Religious Affairs. Now, these statements came at the 9th Chinese Catholic Representative Conference, which opened in Beijing for the first time in 6 years.
North Korea is once again in the news as their talks for developing long-range nuclear weapons, according to them, has become a reality. North Korea has recently warned that its missiles are capable of reaching U.S. mainland. This is a response to South Korea's announcement of a deal with the United States to strengthen its own missile program. Now, this was also after South Korea announced that it would expand its missile range, allowing it to reach anywhere in the north.
Not all are convinced of North Korea's claims. An analyst for CNN said that to acquire the capability requires a lot of testing. And considering what they've done so far, I don't find that credible. But I do think they're working toward acquiring that capability. Another analyst told Fox News that North Korea is probably 3 to 4 years from developing a capable missile, and that the U.S. should really be concerned about the neighbor to the north, referring to China, saying also that we don't have a North Korea problem, we have a China problem.
Interesting. Well, North Korea has in the past test-fired rockets in the year 2006. A lot of activity was taking place there. 2009 and 2012, all of which broke up shortly after launch. So really no success in those missile tests
so
in
far.
Years past, right?
Well, a new conflict between the U.S. and Turkey over the use of Turkey's Incirlik air base during the U.S.-led coalition. Now, the Turkish Defense Minister Fikri Esik said it's thought-provoking that any countries, especially countries with whom we have worked together in NATO for many years, countries who formed a coalition against Islamic State, don't support the operation Turkish armed forces and the Free Syrian Army have started in El Bab, which is a key town in the fighting against ISIL.
He continued, this causes Turkey, of course, to question the Incirlik air base. Well, the air base is considered a key NATO air base in the Middle East and is the largest nuclear storage site in the region, supplying over 5,000 U.S. personnel, and it is used mainly by the U.S. Air Force to fly combat sorties against ISIL in Syria. Well, Turkey is voicing frustration with its U.S. allies, saying that it isn't, referring to the United States, it isn't supporting the fight against Islamic State. This is, of course, just a few of Turkey's allegations against the United States, while America tries to appear unfazed throughout this whole ordeal.
Well, it may seem confusing to some who are keeping up with the relations between Turkey and the U.S., take into consideration that everyone from the U.S. President to the State Department spokesman has called Turkey a friend and an ally, while Erdogan has criticized the U.S. with statements like, America, I've told you many times you either side with us or those terrorist nations. So one's saying, hey, we're all friends. The other one's saying, look, you need to start doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, sounds like they're not on the same page. He also compared the U.S. soldiers, Erdogan did, to merely a terrorist organization dressed up with patches on their uniforms, saying instead that they should wear patches of terrorist organizations and that a nation supporting these terrorists is not a friend of Turkey, but is an open enemy of Turkey.
Well, a little further south to Israel, where Israeli police are questioning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over corruption allegations. Now, details have not yet been released, but Israeli media says that Netanyahu is being investigated for receiving expensive gifts from Israeli and foreign businessmen. He also is facing a second criminal inquiry next week.
Netanyahu's family lawyer was also accused of facilitating a $1.5 billion submarine deal with Germany by getting inappropriate gifts. And this, of course, was some time ago, not just recently. Netanyahu has also admitted to receiving gifts from a French billionaire who has been sentenced to 8 years in prison over a nearly 300 million euro scam.
Well, France's President Francois Hollande has arrived in Iraq to meet with French troops who are assisting government forces battling the Islamic State. His arrival came just a few days after a large-scale offensive in Mosul, which is still a stronghold of Islamic State. Now, experts fear that the military problem will lead to an even bigger problem, even bigger than Islamic State.
Right. Well, that's because the Mosul Dam, which is Iraq's largest dam, it is also in pretty poor condition. Well, the offensive could destroy it, causing it to collapse. Analysts say it would be worse than a nuclear bomb for devastation. They also say Iraq is facing potential catastrophe of biblical proportions. Well, the dam is 60 kilometers north of the city and is the fourth largest in the Middle East. If its walls collapse, well, the citizens of Mosul could be destroyed within hours, literally hours, killing about 1.5 million people in its wake.
That's a lot. Well, journalist Adel Darwish said the situation is extremely dangerous. And Katani stated that the engineers can't perform much of their necessary maintenance unless they have some kind of a secured environment that they can work around in order to do their inspections and so forth. So saying that they should create this secure barrier around the dam where they could bring in the equipment to repair the dam, relieve the pressure, and even clear the areas and small villages downstream of the dam as just a precautionary measure, because the damage could be that damaging, as you mentioned, catastrophic. Concluding, he said, apart from that, he's not sure what else could be done. So they either repair it or face the potential
a lot of lives being lost.
That's right, the damage.
Well, not even the floodwaters from a broken Mosul dam could put out the raging fires in the hearts of mankind, as, of course, the hatred for their own fellow man is continually increasing and leading to a global nuclear conflict. But there is a way to cool the hatred burning in the hearts of mankind, and that is the peaceful solution found in your holy scriptures. What you can do is contact the house of Yahweh today and get your hands and your ears on spiritual food that will give you the strength to turn away from the hate and war and start living in the way of peace as taught by Yisrayl Hawkins and the house of Yahweh.
When you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. For any emails, you can email at info@yahweh.com. For any of the international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen. And once again, don't forget to check out the Yisrael Says program by going to www.yisraelsays.com. You can pull up the search menu, punch in any word, and watch pages and pages of information come up on any subject topic.
Well, get your pencil, paper, and of course your holy scriptures, because up next is Yisrayl Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Kohan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Hammerman.
Thank you for watching.
Let me have your attention real quick. We want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with this. First and foremost, get the book Nuclear Baby. Get that book and study it with your scriptures. Put these things together. Did everyone catch what they said about North Korea trying to launch the nuclear missile toward the United States? Did everyone get the first year they tried that? 2006, but it didn't work out. They tried again 2009. It didn't work out. They tried again 2012. It didn't work out. But notice what they said. North Korea says they're now ready, and they're calling that the nuclear showdown. That's what they're referring to it as, the nuclear showdown. Well, at this time, I'd like to present the greatest teacher in the world, the Great Kohan Yisrayl Abel Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. We're going to have to make a lot of racket. There's a few of us. Praise Yahweh. Woo! 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 You may be seated. Oh, what wonderful news we're getting. I told Kohan Odahyah you had to repeat that because it's very important that you understand and that it was written about beforehand, before it ever took place, before it ever started taking place. That's the important part. Signifies, as the great Kohan Benjamin told us a while ago, to signify, to make you understand the importance of it. Wear it like a signet in your brain, to make you understand and remember how important these prophecies are, and the fact that they're coming to pass, as Yahweh said they would. That's the important part. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Let me see. Let me get to this first. This is great. Google. Fourth part of the earth. If you want to Google the fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates. You got that? Everybody's got a Google, right? Surely everybody does but me. I don't have one, if you can see that. That's going up as high as it'll go. But the first one you'll find is, to read it now, go to the house of Yahweh. Did you get that? Let me read it again. Now catch this. Listen, everybody. Fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates. Remember the scriptures? That fourth part of the earth. If you Google that, the first thing you get, to read it now, the house of Yahweh. Now that's the first one on the list. The second one, October 2012, the house of Yahweh. That's the second one. See, 2 in a row. See, 2 in a row. The third one, Vatican and ISIS. Yahweh's prophecies show the end result of all. House of Yahweh. No one else has room on this thing. It's all house of Yahweh. Try it. You'll see house of Yahweh everywhere now. There's several pages of this, but the third page you'll find this. The Quartet and Vatican in Prophecy. Yisrayl Hawkins. Who in the world is that? He's the man that's hated by all religions. Well, my mind's not working this morning. Oh, boy. Who opposes Babylon. Just brought out this morning. In the news release, let's see, Russia Today released an article, 2014. The great Yisrayl Hawkins covered that one this morning. And you need to remember these things now. Remember the news. Try to remember the news. Don't get distracted with cares and stupidity that doesn't matter. This is the most important thing on the face of the earth. It's the most important thing in your mind. Get it in there, keep it in there, talk about it, gossip about it. Yisrayl Hawkins says Yisrayl Hawkins says salvation is a word that remains relevant for 21st century and explains why in New Post. And that is up. This is almost a record high, I think, of 67,000. Rebecca, if you're listening, get me the latest number on that and send it to me. It says 67,822. 67,822 already. You know, I read years ago that to reach an unbeliever, now this was 100 years ago, to reach an unbeliever, you had to actually be on a radio for 2 to 3 years before they would respond. And of course, in this day and age, since then, computers has been invented. They didn't have computers when I was a child. They started in 1934, but these homemade, home-owned computers we were printing the prophetic word without these. They were in talk. But I think the first one we wanted to buy was like $23,000. That was one you could use at home. That was when they first was starting out to get in the homes. Now I think you can buy them for about $700 or something like that, $800. Well, anyway, these computers made it possible, but it also has a drawback because it pulls people away from Yahweh, and Satan is using it big time. We're going to win out. We're already advancing ahead of Satan and Vatican with knowledge, understanding, wisdom, all of those things she'll never have. Yahweh says who he will teach knowledge, which means knowledge comes from Yahweh. The only thing that comes from this world is war and fighting. But the word salvation, that was new this week, 67,822. The one last week, Yisrayl Hawkins says he is revealing what the Bible really says about keeping the old Jewish law, and that's up to 216,994 this week. So you can see the newspapers are still running it. People are still clicking on it. That don't mean they're going to be converted by this one article, but if they keep reading and listening and getting our booklets and our magazine and so forth, they will keep gaining knowledge, and soon we will see them in the house of Yahweh. That 69,000, isn't that several states away, and I just say the word and you see how fast it got to me? Now that's computer. This article, 67,822, is now up to 72,816. So you can see the rate that this thing is climbing right now as we're talking. People clicking on it, reading it. The third one here, Yisrayl Hawkins says, real religious freedom is when religious truth is known and understood. That's religious freedom. To hear and learn to know the truth. That's freedom, and that's what Yahweh has made possible. Yahweh gives understanding to whom he wants to give understanding, and he says you're not going to get understanding. None of your wickedness is going to let you understand. No wicked, no evil, no God worshippers are going to understand. That's in the same chapter that the elders were all quoting this morning, Daniel 9 and 12. And of course it shows the end. No one can show this knowledge except Yahweh. He's the only one that claims to. No gods, none of the gods claim to foretell the future, or to raise the dead, or heal the sick, or anything. They make you sicker. They come in and gather the money that's brought forth from the drugs, and they take it back and spend it on whoredom and God worship, more God worship, storing it away. I don't know what they're storing it away for. They got more than they'll ever use now. They buy more paintings, I guess, of naked gods and build more statues of them. I'm just guessing what you're doing with it. Real religious freedom is knowing the truth. That's up to 242,164 now. It's climbing rapidly. The U.S. has begun sending troops to Russia's border. This has just started. They're building up their muscle power. The problem, though, with threatening other nations, saying we're going to be tough, we're going to destroy you. Well, the other nations have the same bombs. In fact, Russia is almost outnumbering everybody in the world now, but we're not afraid of them. We think we can destroy them. As Malachi Martin brought out, we think we can destroy them all in in a quick blow, a quick first blow, and that's what they're planning on. Hundreds of U.S. tanks, heavy equipment, flows into Europe to counter Russian aggression. It's always the other person that they're scared of. Then the other person says, well, we got to get something done over there because the United States is being very aggressive now, and we're afraid they're going to hit. Extreme weather in 2016 cost billions of dollars, and the drought is still on. That's hard to realize. We still have drought. That hasn't stopped. Yet the places are getting washed away. The tornadoes is tearing the houses and cities up. California braces for once in 10-year storm amid fears of flooding, which they say helps none in the drought situation. Well, the thing about it is that Yahshua placed the importance, and he said, we've got to show the people how important these prophecies are. The prophecies, show the importance, signify them. Remember Yahshua's words in Luke, fools won't make it into the kingdom. And he says in Luke 24 and 25, you're a fool, you're slow of heart. Get your heart to changing. Start believing. Instead of talking down the prophecies, talk the prophecies, and you'll start understanding them. Build up Yahweh's work, and you'll start understanding it. The scriptures is actually written to where the evil priests could not understand them. It was written here a little and there a little, and then the person must put these together, line upon line, precept upon precept, and then they've got to understand it, as you see in Revelations 1:1 that was quoted this morning by one of the elders, to where you got to explain it. The apostle, Yahweh showed this in the scriptures. The apostle came up, and a man was sitting in a buggy reading something in Isaiah, and the apostle said, "Understand," the King James, "understandest thou what thou readest?" And he said, "How could I without someone to guide me?" So he started guiding that person then and explaining it to him, and he marveled at what he saw in the scripture. Well, he just showed you that so you would understand that you can't do it on your own. You've got to join the party at his house. And that's the reason Yahshua said this. He said, go to the place. In Yochanan 14, let's turn there and read that one. Yochanan 14, I mentioned this before last week, but 14 and verse 29, he says, so now I have told you before it comes. I've told you before it comes to pass. Now the importance that we see on this, the significance of this, is that no one can do that. No human being can do that. Yahweh can. And Yahweh puts this out for everyone to know that he can forecast everything. He's got everything under control. He's the one that created mankind for the purpose of making, listen to this, for the purpose of making you, making those he calls, making those who would come to him, who would receive, as he put it. No more needs to be brought out on that, and I think one of the younger priests is got one plan to bring on the word receives. But those who receive it, take it by law and put it to work in their lives. Yahweh says those will receive the light the truth, the laws, and those will be guaranteed to become sons and daughters of Yahweh. Well, Yahshua, you see the stress that he put on that? So now I have told you before it comes to pass, in order that when it does come to pass, you might believe. Flip over to, that was 13, 14, 29. Look back to 13, 19. 13, 19. Now I tell you before it comes, in order that when it does come to pass, you may believe. I am he. Now truly, truly I say to you, he who receives whomsoever I send receives me. And Yahshua said in Revelations, that was quoted to you too this morning, and Yahweh said to his messenger, you've got to signify this. You've got to make them see the importance of believing this. How important these prophecies are to us. The importance of them. Well, the importance is salvation. If you realize this and remember this, we're on trial. Satan is in court, taking us to court, standing at my right hand. Yes, that's me. We're on trial. Yahweh says to heaven and earth, witness this now. That's in Deuteronomy 30. And Satan is standing accusing. She's the accuser of the brethren. The accuser. Saying, laughing, and saying, look what this man did. Look what this man did. Well, of course, it doesn't matter what you did 20 years ago. If you repented for it, it's blotted out. Yahshua's blood washed it out. But the fact is, this in Revelations, the Revelations, if you don't believe it, you join the crowd, of the Yadamites, and you stand in the 7 hills of Rome taking from them whatever they want to dish out at you, which they say, if you study the Scriptures, then that makes idiots out of you. That's their teaching coming from their mouth, Pope Francis. But the significance of these prophecies means your eternal life or your eternal death. The world has no answers. You just saw that on the news. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to solve any of the problems, even the small ones they don't know how to solve. And it's getting worse. Everything you see, from the school shootings to the road rage and using automobiles, the airport, the man comes in and shoots all these people, and they say there's no way to solve this problem. Shut down the airport. It's the only way to solve the problem. There's no solving. They have no answer. We're the only ones that have the answers, and these answers are written. They're actually written. Starting in 1976, they were written in the Mark of the Beast, as the great elder brought out there this morning. Well, it's Yahweh's plan, as Genesis 1:26 says. He tells us what he's going to do, and in the last days he's going to establish his house, and that's where salvation then is offered. And he said before that there was no salvation. This is it. Why? Because if we don't receive the power to resurrect the dead, none of them will be resurrected. That's what Yahweh shows. He works through man. No, he doesn't work through angels. To which of the angels did he ever say this? None of them at all. Read and believe what he says. No, he's not talking to heavenly beings. He's talking to mankind who's drawn from the breast. Drawn from the breast. Yeah, drawn from the breast. That's mankind. I think I told you, I'm not sure, but there was a class going on with a group of elders in the college that I went to, and they were stumbling over this scripture. And and they were giving all kinds of interpretation. And one of them said, "What do you think, Bill?" And I said, "It's mankind. It's obvious it's mankind he's going to give this knowledge to." Yahshua said, and I quoted the scripture to them, "Yes, I received this authority as judge because I am the Son of Man." He couldn't have received it otherwise. No, no gods or angels or messengers of gods are going to receive this. He gives it to man, and it's our job to do. And when we qualify, if you got the gist of my sermon last week, we got up to the place where Yahweh showing this sea of glass. I think you could spell that S-E-E instead of S-E-A, S-A-E. I think you could spell it. This is to show you, or so you could see. So you could see. Well, he gives this to the prophets. And Daniel, he had this whole sea of glass and the armies and the damage that they were going to do by force, trying to force people into their religion. And through this was going on. It was the kings of Israel. They were forcing one another, and when a king had a great army, or what he thought was a great army, he'd come up against the smaller ones and take them and demand tribute, like the gangs in the cities today. They say they've got these same gangs going on, but a smaller style, and they say, "We will protect your place like a restaurant. We will protect your place for a certain price per month. So we'll protect it from fighting inside the restaurant and tearing your restaurant up. We'll protect it from someone coming in and setting it on fire." Well, the owner knew that what they're talking about is, we won't set your place on fire if you give us money. We won't come in here and start a fight and tear your restaurant all to pieces if you give us money each month. Well, on a bigger scale, we want your oil. So the kings of Yisrael, when they first started under the days of Samuel, they built an army, and then they wanted more territory, and the ones who owned the army says, "Let's take this group in. That will give us this much more taxes. Let's go over here next and take this group." Well, that was the way it started spreading. So the people, instead of building religious communities or working to enter the kingdom, to learn what milk and honey was, to learn how to get salvation, they got their minds totally on this, as Samuel said they would, and he told them, the kings are going to demand this and this and this. Well, the kings were owned by the rich men of the group. The rich men of the group wouldn't pay their salary if they didn't do what they told them to do. So they risked their lives going out and taking in these communities, these settlements, and they built theirs up. In Daniel's day, Daniel saw this. He was actually witnessing this on the Sea of Glass, and had before him on the Sea of Glass, he had the witness, one that wore the linen, he says, explaining this to him. And he was writing it down just as it was being explained to him. So what I want you to get here is that the group called the House of Yahweh, at that time, before you were born, Yahweh had you programmed to where he could put certain things in your subconscious mind. So when the bell rung when you were actually born, and then you came to a certain age, a calling took place. Like an alarm clock was set off in your head. And a voice was arranged before that to where you would hear something, see something, hear a rumor, like the woman from that Yahweh spoke to, named Nora, and started a rumor. And when certain people, heard that rumor, they came. And Yahshua said, no one can come to me unless the Spirit of the Father draw him. Now, he wasn't speaking of Casper the Weinberger, or Casper the friendly ghost, or wine bubbler, or drunkard. No, he wasn't speaking to any of that. He was speaking of his house. And this is what Daniel saw. And of course, he didn't understand it, he said, but he saw it and he wrote it down for us. Then the writings became authority from Yahweh. Once he put these writings out, they became authority from Yahweh. Up until the time of Yahshua, we were spoken to by the prophets of Yahweh. We were spoken to. Now, somehow or another, if you can imagine this, in the microorganisms that was to make up your brain, your subconscious mind, which there's kingdoms of microorganisms that are computerized to take in certain knowledge. And Yahweh arranged this to where they would. So when he got ready for you to be born, then you were born with certain things in your subconscious mind that you didn't know were there, but they were put there to further his work in this day and time, and that's the reason you're here. Well, so this is Yahweh's plan now. Don't forget, this is Yahweh's plan. Genesis 1:26. It's not the plan of the gods. The plan of the gods is shown to you in Genesis 3:1 through 5, where Satan says, don't follow Yahweh, and all the world went that way. She said it, don't follow Yahweh. Why can't the Christian preacher see this and stop wanting to be like the gods, evil like the gods? Why? Surely you can see that now. No one can come unto me unless the Spirit of the Father draw that person. They're tied up in the world. Their brain is tied up. It's not there. No one. Yahweh has put together what he wants to put together. And Yahweh is going to put together 2 billion that you're going to teach, billions more that you're going to resurrect. That's going to be your job. And if we don't make it, then his plan won't make it. But we are going to make it. Yahshua made it. Think of the impossible. Remember how quickly you started sinning in your life? You were made subject to sin. All of us were. But you overcame it. Because Yahshua, he overcame. He didn't sin, but he had the same pulls and desires to sin that you have now. He just didn't give in. He didn't give in. And he overcame. And being the Son of Man, he was able to die for your sins. So you could keep repenting and overcoming, and all who were sincere would be practicing these laws of Yahweh. That should be clear as crystal. I don't know how you could possibly misunderstand that. In Yahshua 1, and I think we got to that. I failed to get the scripture that I left off on, and it doesn't hurt to repeat it. I keep telling the elders, it doesn't hurt to repeat that. Repetition will build in their minds, and they'll get to where they won't forget it. But remember Genesis, Yahweh's plan. That's his plan. And he tells you what that plan is. And then Yahshua was shown this by Yahshua Messiah. In the beginning, he says, was the plan of Yahweh. So that should be simple. Well, it's not believed. None of the Christianity believes this. In fact, they think it was the plan of the gods to make them follow after lust and war. Lust, fighting, and war. Be like the gods. In verse 2, he says, the same plan was in the beginning with Yahweh. All things were done according to it, and without it nothing was done that was done. The same thing is taking place right now, and we see that Yahweh knew this was going to take place, and he not only knew it, he prophesied it for us and said, in this generation, it's going to get worse than ever before in the period of history of mankind. Prophesied to us and said, you're going to see bombs that can darken the sun. And it's going to be in this generation, he says. When you see this, then you'll know that you're in a certain generation. Well, that generation of the nuclear bomb began in 1934, along with the computer that was also started in 1934. The telling about it was the body that I stand in right now that was born in 1934. All three of these things all took place at the same year, in the same year. Anyone should believe that. They're fools if they don't. How long will they remain a fool? Well, that's up to Yahweh. Okay, he says in verse 4, he says, in this plan was life. So we know that Yahweh is the only one that offers life. Do you have another Bible somewhere? No. You got the same one I was raised on. And I found this. Yahweh showed it to me in the King James Version. For anyone to learn about salvation, anyone in the entire world, there's only one place you can go to get it. Now we're bringing this into every home, but you're required to respond to it and come to his house. Go to his house. Don't do the things that you're doing now, everyone doing what is pleasing in your own sight. You're liable to get you a guitar, get behind closed doors in the dark, and start getting people to commit fornication and adultery. That's how bad it is and how easily it is for a dummy, a fool, to get drawn out of Yahweh's work. Now that light shines in the darkness. Remember that word darkness? I'll show you in prophecy where it's prophesied. But the darkness does not take hold of it. They can't unless the Spirit of the Father draw them. You can't do it. The life in it is life. If verse 2, it was in the beginning, that that the Spirit. Look at chapter 6 there, right quick, and read it again. Chapter 6 and verse 63. The Spirit in second Yochanan. Let's get that first. Hold your place there in chapter 6 and turn over to Yochanan. That's 2nd Yochanan 1. 2nd Yochanan 1. 2nd Yochanan. 2nd Yochanan 1. Look at verse 5. But now I plead with you, brothers, not as though I wrote any new law to you, any new laws to you, but that which we had heard from the beginning. He's not speaking of new laws. I remember on that stage right over there a few years ago that a man, he was a rich man, and he read a scripture in Yochanan, and then he tried to make out like that Yahshua brought out something different from the laws. And people shook his hand when he came off of the stage. They was waiting for him. I was waiting for him too. And I said, why didn't you read the next verse? Because the next verse plainly contradicted what he said. And he said, he told his comrades that I attacked him. I didn't really attack him. I just explained the truth. I was a little harder then than I am now, so it probably wasn't as pleasant. But he left. The man left. But I explained in detail and showed him the scripture that he didn't read. And I said, can't you see that? And he wouldn't even answer me. Well, anyway, this is how easily people get turned off. And of course, the people that shook his hand, they left too. Well, verse 6, he says, and this is love. This is love. This that you heard from the beginning here in verse 5. Beginning, in the beginning, from the beginning, that we love one another. Yalkanan, 1 Yalkanan 4, 1 Yalkanan 3, and I think it's verse 10, that says, if you don't keep Yahweh's laws, then you don't love your brother. If you don't keep Yahweh's laws, you're sinning against your brother. Every time you break a law, you're sinning against your brother. And Yahshua said this, if you look unto a woman with lust after her, this includes the women too. If you look unto a man, you're married, you're committing sin, committing adultery, which will knock you out of the kingdom. This is the things you've got to get out of your mind, get out of your subconscious mind. Tell yourself how evil it is, repent of it, and ask Yahweh's help in doing so. Well, in verse 6 here, 2 Yalkanan 1, verse 6, now this is love, that we walk. This is love. Do you see that, the first three words? This is love, Christian preachers. It's not love to break Yahweh's laws. This is love. This is what the King James Version says, too. Every version I've read said the same thing. This is love, that you walk in His laws, that you keep His commandments. Satan doesn't teach love, 1 John 3, 4, 7 and 8. You belong to Satan. She teaches follow the evil like the gods. That Yahweh said, don't follow the evil like the gods. The Creator said this. Back to Yalkanan 6:63 now. 6:63. Yahshua said, then if you should see the Son of Man ascending, where He will be high priest, it is the Spirit that gives life. It is the Spirit that gives life. Flesh is useless. Flesh is useless. Now here's where they conjure up in their mind Casper the friendly ghost, and all of them are wanting to turn to a Casper body and go floating around in the clouds. They won't read the rest of that. It is the Spirit that gives life. But what is the Spirit that gives you life? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The laws that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life everlasting. The laws. The laws. Let's go over to 22. Revelations 22, I'm sorry. Revelations 22. The elder covered this very well this morning, but I'm going to repeat it once again here. The laws. The laws. And Yahshua said in verse 14, first off, He identifies Himself here. In verse 1, behold, I come quickly. We are the ones that told Yalkanan that. What Yahshua said, and Yalkanan wrote it down for us to have when we were born. That is the beautiful thing about this whole thing. If you understand that, you can see the power that Yahweh has. From these stones, Yahshua said. He could raise up servants of His to Him from these very stones right here. He doesn't have to have mankind. But the fact is, this is what he chose. Mankind is going to enjoy life throughout all eternity to the fullest, while we do the work of Yahweh, teaching all nations, kingdoms, everything throughout the universe. The wars are going on. They see, I have articles here in front of me, but I don't have time to read them, but they see bombs blasting and so forth in outer space. And of course, this is going to go on. We're going to get involved in it. That is, the gods certainly will. But blessed are those who keep his laws, 14, they may have right to life. Now remember what Yochanan 1 said. In this plan was life. Well, Yahshua, who speaks to, as Hebrews says, Hebrews as king, high priest, speaks to us in these days through this word that we had Yochanan, that we repeated to Yochanan till he got it right and got it written down right. Yahshua is speaking to the whole house of Yahweh now. And I'm reading what I told Yochanan to write. Isn't that beautiful? And Yochanan saw the future and heard every word that we were teaching and wrote it down. Blessed are those who keep his laws. They have right to life. In this message from the beginning was life. That's Yochanan 1:1. Don't forget that. And those who receive him, wait till you get that message. It's a wonderful. You'll rejoice greatly when you hear receive this and hear it explained. It wouldn't hurt if we had 100 sermons on that word received. Received. Those who receive him. Yochanan 1 and about verse 10. Those who received him, he gave them power to become sons and daughters. Yes, that's what you got right now. You got power, authority, the opportunity, the potential to actually become a son or daughter of Yahweh. Those blessed are those who keep his laws. Now this is the Savior doing the speaking. For outside are the whoremongers and so forth, the Sodomites. The Sodomites, yes, that's a great story too. Verse 16, I, Yahshua, have sent my messenger to testify to you these things in the congregations of the house of Yahweh. And then he tells who he is, and I don't have time to cover that one, but he gives his messenger. His messenger, that's us. We're the only messengers prophesied, and as Moshe said, he'll have no work other than that he has prophesied in advance. Now let's go back to Yochanan again. Yochanan 1. And look at verse 5. Verse 5. Now that light shines in the darkness. We're not covering it. We're taking it out for all the world to see. Yochanan 1:5. That light shines in darkness. It's shining right now. You can pick this up anywhere in the world. If you got a computer, if you got a telephone. By the way, they got televisions now, I'm told, that it's actually computerized, and you can actually program this thing, and you mash a button, and there's the house of Yahweh. Yeah. You can even tune it to where it can't be changed. And there's four different programs of the house of Yahweh that you can actually tune in by pushing a button. Well, that light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not receive it. The darkness. This is a beautiful thing right here. You need to get this and understand this right here. The light shines in darkness. Well, to compare that, keep that in mind. Go over to Psalms. Psalms 119. Psalms 119, and look at 105. Now that light light. Now, I know Christianity is speaking, saying that's Jesus Christ. Well, they're so stupid they don't even know who Jesus Christ is. Versus Yahshua Messiah. That's the darkness that we're seeing in the world today. It's a hard thing to get through this darkness, and only Yahweh can penetrate this darkness, and He's doing it just like He said He would with a small group. We're a small group, He says that also, but we're getting it done because He's opening the doors, and no man can shut those doors. He made that possible. Think of this. This land was not even discovered till 1492, supposedly. And Yahweh made it possible in the writing of the laws, which the Catholic Church was trying to get full control of. But Yahweh saw to it the freedom of speech be included in the laws of the U.S. This couldn't be done in any other nation. They wouldn't let you. They'd kill you. They do here too. But Yahweh stands guard. He encamps about His house. Remember that. That's why we're still alive and speaking today. With this light now, the light shines in the darkness, if you got that. If you look at verse 105, you see what that light is. Your law. Your law is a lamp. That serves two things that you need to keep in mind there. The 7-lamp lampstand, that's the 7 prophesied works of Yahweh. I will have no other. Rest assuredly, I will have no other work except that is prophesied. Did you know that the Hitler was killing everyone that owned a 7-lamp lampstand? Anyone who kept the Sabbath? Anyone who would not eat pork? Yes, that's the ones that Hitler was killing. Your law is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. That's the light. If you don't interpret these things and let the Scripture interpret the Scriptures, look on over to verse 130, then you will make it into the kingdom if you'll follow this. If you look at if you try to interpret this yourself and say Jesus Christ is the light, well, there's no such thing. Those are two gods, and Yahweh classifies all gods as being evil adversaries of His. So you won't find Jesus teaching the laws of Yahweh. That's the reason you don't find it in the church. Satan is their teacher, and whatever the teacher tells you to do, that is what you're going to do. That's the words of the Savior to all of these religions throughout the world. 4,199 religions right now in the world today, and all of them are teaching the same thing: iniquity. Do away with the laws of Yahweh. Only the house of Yahweh prophesied to do so. When Yahweh said, I'll build my house, He told you what it would teach, right? Well, lo and behold, that's exactly what it's teaching. But no one else is teaching this, and they hate us for teaching this. We're the most hated of all organizations on the face of the earth. Well, in Psalms now, 119, verse 130. Psalms 119 and 130, he says, the unfolding of your laws gives light. They give understanding to the simple. So here we see that they bring understanding, quickness of understanding, even change the heart, as Malachi said. Now remember the word darkness in John 1:5. And look at Jeremiah now. Jeremiah, because this is bringing us to our day. Jeremiah 23. Jeremiah 23. This brings us to our time period, where we're in, where we're actually given enjoyable bodies, where you can actually take this body and enjoy the fuel that goes into it. You don't have to back up to a gas pump and pump it in, but you can eat and enjoy it with your taste buds that Yahweh gave you, made out of microorganisms, of course, who are ruling in your mouth right now, guarding your teeth and your gums and your vocal cords so you can talk. All of these things Yahweh created. Think of the wisdom that this being has, brethren. And then you can begin to understand all these beautiful things he's showing you here. In Jeremiah 23 now. Jeremiah 23, look at verse 1. Woe to the pastors who destroy and scatter my sheep. The sheep of my pasture, says Yahweh. If you remember now, when Samuel, King Samuel, the prophet Samuel, was judging Israel, he was the supreme judge of Israel. He followed the laws, taught the laws. He had a circuit he followed throughout Israel, and then came back to his home, what he called home, which was Abel, of course. And then every year had this circuit that he followed that he taught. Well, they wanted a king. And Samuel said this is where they made their official break-off. The kings that they chose to follow. This brought about what Daniel saw and wrote for us, what we explained to Daniel would be in our lifetime right now. The ones living this right now is the ones that Daniel saw that told him what these kings were going to do. And from these kings that they chose, they started fighting, forcing, taking by force, following, of course, the school of Nimrod, bringing them into cities, wall-to-wall cities, building up a strong army to defend themselves so they wouldn't be scattered. Scattered. Yes, when another king came in, he would take the best of the best. When they captured a city, as you saw in Daniel. Daniel was taken captive with the rest of them. When a king came in and took Jerusalem, it says Yahweh gave him certain things that he would take from there and take somewhere else. That is, Yahweh didn't stop him from this. Yahweh said, you want kings? This is the way they're going to do. And Yahweh submitted to this, let them do it, to prove that what their way would bring. So Daniel, if you remember, said there's 4 great kings. 4. You got that word 4 on the news today. I hope everyone caught that. It's in the news again. 4. Well, woe to the pastors who scatter. What these kings would do, under the supervision of their religious leader, the Edomites, the scepter holder, under their gods, and they had a god for every city, Yahweh said. Every strong city had a god. And when they went in and took this city, they'd say, no, you don't worship that God. You come here and worship our God. Our God will show you what to do. So they was a little bit different in their teaching. Well, this formed another organization which became a strong deity, a strong agency to deal with. And Daniel saw these 4 great kings, great kings, really strong religions. They had an army and a horn, a voice. Well, he said, they scatter my people. This is how they scattered them. And the strongest king would go in and grab them and take them here or there, and then they wouldn't take everyone. They would leave certain ones there, but they would take the best of the best to serve the king, the smartest of the smartest. And they eventually wound up beyond Babylon to Rome. And that's what we're dealing with today. Who runs the world? They're the guiders of the kings of the earth. Those 4 great kings are involved. Yes, the quartet is very much involved with Rome. And if you watch the news closely, you can see it. In fact, I got that scheduled to be brought, I do believe, of the influence that the Pope and the Oslo Accord, the Vatican. The Pope is just a runner boy. He's a Santa Claus. He's a Easter egg hunter, keeping all these things going for the Vatican. The Vatican is this strong group of kings that scatter my sheep with religions. They wouldn't be scattered if they'd have hung on to Samuel. They wouldn't be scattered. Yahweh would have sent them another one. Even if when Samuel died, they could have had a strong leader after that and stayed with Yahweh with no wars or fighting. Yahweh would have fought their battles for them. But he said, since you want kings, this is what you're going to have to do. And this is what you're going to go through. And you're going to have to start killing and killing and killing. And there would be no end to it. And that's exactly what's taken place. Well, now he says, woe to those who destroy and scatter my sheep. The sheep of my pastor, says Yahweh. Therefore, this is what Yahweh, the Father of Israel, says against the pastors who feed my people. You have scattered my flock and driven them away, carried them away, and have not visited them. Behold, I am going to visit you for the evil. Notice the evil now, evil like the gods. Remember that. Every time you see that verse, remember Genesis 3 verse 5. The evil of your doings. Now you remember it says in verse 16 of this chapter, if you would have taught Yahweh's ways, you would have turned them from the evil of their doings. Well, in verse 2, he shows you the evil of their doings. And then, let me see, do we show this here? Jeremiah. Let's see, verse 3. But, you see that word, but? I will gather my remnant. Now, he's speaking of a time here to Jeremiah. Jeremiah wrote in 599, this chapter right here. He wrote this in 599, BY. But he is speaking of a remnant that he's talking about right here that didn't take place and start until 1934. 1934 is the remnant of Yahweh that he's speaking of here, that he's going to protect. Yes, protect. He's going to protect, encamp around it, about his house. And I see that. I already know it. We've already seen it in the protection that he's given us. Otherwise, we would have been destroyed here just a few years ago, like some others were. But we'll get into this now next week. Don't let the weather hold you back. It's actually pleasant in here. I don't know why anyone would be missing. I was thinking about taking some clothes, some warm sweater off here. It's getting a little bit hot in here now. But anyway, don't let it stop you. Don't let weather stop you. Don't let cold or heat. Of course, it's going to be too hot now next week. Next Sabbath. It's supposed to be up in the 70s, I think, by about Wednesday or Thursday of this week. The news today is filled with exactly what Yahweh said it would be filled with at this time period. We see the greatest suffering ever. We see the fourth part of the earth being mentioned too in prophecy. In the news as well as prophecy now. That fourth part of the earth. I don't know if they got that from the house of Yahweh, or maybe they got it from the Holy Scriptures, but they're recognizing that all this war now is taking place in that fourth part of the earth. It will spread. It's going to, but the United States, I've encamped about my house. He started that before the United States was settled. He already had plans before 1492. Satan came in and tried to stop this. She tried, but Yahweh outsmarted her as usual. And he put within their own laws things that would protect. And then he inspired certain people in high offices, as high as the presidency, to take notice and to do a portion of his will. We saw that he did this with kings in the scriptures. It shouldn't be too hard to believe what took place with the house of Yahweh either. But Yahweh had it planned before the United States was settled that his house would be here. In the last part, the ends of the earth, the last part of the United States that would be settled, he had it planned and he prophesied it. But no one understood it. People read about the branch, and the scholars say they've fumbled over these scriptures for years trying to understand who this branch is. Some said it's Melchizedek. Well, he is dead. Some said Jesus Christ. No, he hadn't been invented yet. These gods came up later, but they're curious about who that branch was. Well, Daniel was too, and he said he saw him and talked to him, but he didn't understand. And Yahweh said, close the books, you'll understand in the end. Well, the end started in 1934. The end, the last generation, along with the invention of the computer and the nuclear bombs that we're facing right now, won't be too long now. These nuclear bombs are getting ready to have this war. What Yahweh is doing is trying to teach you, encourage you, don't fear, but have faith in Yahweh. Have faith in Yahweh that he's camped about this house. Nothing is going to occur to this house. Yahweh is going to keep this work going right through to the end. They will come to us. They will be coming to us. Praise Yahweh. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.